Too early to talk NFL draft? No chance. No chance. I've got something. I might end up being stubborn about this one, all right? Good afternoon to you. Good Monday afternoon. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Double Shot, back after a week off because I had all kinds of hockey work to do on the other side of the country. And while that was happening, the Senior Bowl was going on in Mobile, Alabama. We'll have Chris Halleck on to talk about that in the next segment. He was down there covering it for us, of course. And we're going to talk about wide receivers. He's not going to want to talk about wide receivers because everyone's talking about defensive linemen. I get that. That's the sexy pick in this class. That's a sexy position. But I'm talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm talking about their needs. And yes, of course, you can make a case, a powerful case, that because they got exposed the way they did on run defense during that collapse, because Art Rooney made a point with those of us in that room with him a couple of weeks ago about how he didn't use the word embarrassing, but you could tell he was embarrassed by the way they couldn't stop the run. And then on top of that, this class, yeah, they're gonna want to find a way. I don't even want to call it a Band-Aid after. When you get gashed for 299 yards on the ground in the playoffs, you don't need a Band-Aid. You need a tourniquet. But I want a playmaker. I want another playmaker. I want some playmakers on this offense. And I don't believe that those are going to materialize out of free agency. You want to talk about T. Higgins, you can get all into that. They're not paying for someone at Higgins' scale. When have they ever done that? And when would you do it when it comes to the wide receiver position where, you know, the behavior for whatever reason among most of these guys is really erratic, unpredictable? The last thing you want when you're committing that kind of percentage of your cap to somebody is not knowing who or what you're going to be employing. I want to see a playmaker. I want to see a reliable playmaker. I want to see one that's a little bit low risk in terms of the capital that you put into it. That's a draft pick. That's a first-round draft pick. We can say, well, they have George Pickens, and you'll be right when it comes to making plays. We don't need to go over everything else that comes with that, with George, whether or not they even want him past the coming year. And I'd be kind of surprised if they did. We can say, and this would be fair as well, that Calvin Austin keeps getting better. We can say that Roman Wilson's in the house. Oh, we have no idea what he can actually do. We can say Jaylen Warren is capable of making plays out of the backfield. We don't know if he can be a number one running back, meaning staying on the field with Najee Harris out of the mix. We can say Pat Freiermuth will be there for you on occasion. We'll say that Arthur Smith doesn't necessarily use him as much as he can, but we're not talking about Travis Kelce there either. So where is this playmaker? Where is the commitment to the offense after all this time? And yeah, I know they've been drafting offensive tackles for a while, but I'm talking about really just saying, listen, we're going to go with Justin Fields as QB1. We're going to give him everything that he needs to succeed. That did not happen this past season. In those 6 starts of his, he had a leaky, unproven offensive line and was getting chased all over the place. To his credit, he was able to escape it. And his wide receivers had the worst rate. They can track stuff like this now of getting open. That's handcuffing him before he even gets started. Everyone's trying to analyze Fields. He did this and he did that. You have no idea what Fields can do unless he's out there with an offensive line and at least 1 or 2 playmakers. He didn't have that. He didn't have either of those things. Get the wide receiver. Get the wide receiver. Chris is up next. At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects. Joined now, as promised, by Chris Halleck, freshly back from Mobile, Alabama, and the Senior Bowl, and all kinds of prospect concepts for us this week. And all I want to hear out of them, Chris, are the wide receivers. All I want to hear is that the Steelers are going to get themselves another offensive playmaker, and that's not what you're going to give me, is it?
No, they did not focus a lot of attention. Some attention. Arthur Smith did watch the wide receivers for a little bit on day one and a little bit more often on day two. But yeah, the vast majority of the contingency there was focused on defensive line and defensive line and defensive line. I mean, that's how this is going to go, isn't it? Yeah. And whenever you see, hear, or read accounts of a class that's that position heavy, that's that position rich, we've seen in recent years that it's been offensive tackle, it's been different groups. It tends to play out that way. There's not a whole lot of surprises. I mean, yeah, occasionally somebody will do something insanely stupid, an individual team. But positionally, you will see that group come to pass, don't you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the one thing to consider when you look at the depth of the defensive line class is that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get one of those guys in the first round, because there's going to be a good player there in the second round, and there's a really good chance there's going to be a good player there in the third round. And so that gives you the opportunity to address a position like wide receiver that's not quite as strong in this class, whether it be in the first round or the second round or even the third round. Like, there will be options there, and you can still, if defensive line is that important, and it sure looks like it is to the Steelers, you can still get a good player and not have to address it on day one or even early on day two.
Yeah, there's always this guy's going to fall, that position's going to fall. And here again, I'm going to be stubborn and stick with the wide receiver notion, because when I think of the Steelers drafting wide receivers in a deep class, what I think of is, they'll get the guy in the second round who's a bad actor. Okay? No, I mean, let's just call it what it is.
Yep.
Okay? Everyone, how does an athlete like Pickens fall? How does that happen? Well, we found out. How did Chase Claypool fall? Oh my God. Well, here we found out. And I just once, I think you want to make that the priority going in here. But let's go with what's there. And let's also remember that Art Rooney, told us that the one of the things that bothered him the most, maybe more than anything else, was getting gashed on the run. So if you're looking for Stephon Tuitt part 2, or even Cam Hayward part 2 to get really ambitious or whatever, you could think to yourself, hey, I'm going to fix it just like this. Is that player available?
There will be some defensive linemen in this class that are scary, scary good. Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. He looks like, he did a lot for his draft stock, and his draft stock was already good to begin with. And I think now he's not just a bona fide first round pick, but might even be out of the Steelers' reach at 21st overall. But even then, there was still like Darius Alexander out of Toledo. Toledo, not a big school. You're not looking at the class of the Big Ten or the SEC or anything like that. But man, I don't think anybody did more for his draft stock than that guy. He lined up, whether it was in between the center and the guard, or he lined up on the edge where you normally see Alex Highsmith or TJ Watt, and just did nothing but win all week. Now, granted, those are college prospects, but
still
winning,
it's the best of the college prospects.
Right. And so that's when you're like, whoa. Okay, now what's he going to do at the combine? What's he going to do with his pro day? And so when you see a guy who was originally in, granted, take it for what you will because it's Pro Football Focus, but he was number 184 on their big board, and he climbed 120 spots after Senior Bowl week. So this guy, yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
Sorry, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So when you see that kind of depth and you're starting to see the cream rise to the top, there will be, I'm not saying they're going to get stuff to it or they're going to get another Javon Hargrave or anything like that, but the chances of them getting a guy like that are way better this year because this class is so rich, and it hasn't been in several years.
Well, give me some body language reports. You're there. You're spending time on the field in covering this event for our website, DK Pittsburgh Sports, and you're seeing what these guys are doing. You mentioned Arthur Smith keeping an eye on wide receivers. Now, understand, everybody who's not familiar with the Senior Bowl process, they'll see everything. Okay, yeah. There's footage of everything, but there are certain things, and coaches will tell you this, and scouts will tell you this, that they just really want human eyes on. What did you see the most from the Mike Tomlin group, whether it was Smith, Terrell Austin, whoever, as far as eyes on?
I mean, obviously, defensive line was their biggest focus. I mean, Tomlin would, as he normally is, would be right there. I mean, almost on top of the prospects as they're about to do certain drills, just watching. And I think he wants to see, how they respond to coaching, get a really up close look on actual technical stuff like their get off or their technique when it comes to doing certain drills. Terrell Austin was also really close. Like you don't normally see some Steelers coordinators or position coaches or anybody else is there that are that close to the action unless they're actually working the Senior Bowl, and there was nobody on the coaching staff that was. So Terrell Austin was pretty close too. But then even Andy Weidel, I talk about Darius Alexander out of Toledo, Andy Weidel on that last practice afterward, as soon as I walked onto the field for the media availability, I saw Andy walk over to Darius Alexander, give him a couple pats on the shoulder, say a few words to him, and then kind of walk away. And so you're just kind of noticing that they're taking notice of every little thing they possibly can, whether that be actual performance and drills, whether that be how they respond to whatever Tomlin says to him, ask certain questions like, what's your favorite pass rush moves, whatever it is. They're trying to get a feel for every little thing. And what they'll do from this process on out is start to have more interviews, whether it be at the combine or the pro day, and get to know them even better on a personal level so that they're also getting a good human being too, not just a good football player.
They're taking a defensive lineman, aren't they, Halleck?
Probably.
They're taking a defensive lineman. Way to ruin the whole show, Halleck. When we come back, J1Q.
Safety is a habit. Gun safety and responsible storage are no different. Help prevent gun accidents, misuse, and theft. Keep firearms safe and secure when not in use. For safe storage options, visit projectchildsafe.org.
Time now for today's J1Q. That stands for just one question. And for that, this guy.
What's up, DK? This is Webb from Fairfax, Virginia. And one topic I haven't heard a peep about is what happened to Roman Wilson. I mean, in the beginning of the season, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you, sir, but I couldn't help myself. Now, before I get to my question, I want to thank you guys for the past couple weeks of surgical analysis. What needed to happen was an autopsy for that final stretch of the season and, of course, that playoff loss. And I think you guys did a great job of pinpointing what it is that went wrong and the fact that things weren't always that great when they seemed to be. Now, moving on to more positive matters, what is one thing the Steelers can do in free agency and one thing that they can do in the draft that'll make you perk up and go, oh, I think they're on the right track here. Now, maybe I'm being a little too optimistic, but hey, I'm always going to keep my head up and say, here we go. And always, keep up the great work.
My guy, you totally had me there. I don't see these things in advance. I want, that was impressive. I'm sitting here going, there's no way he's asking me about Roman Wilson. That's the number one subject here by a zillion miles, and I'm not immune to it. I brought him up myself in the opening segment. I mentioned the wide receivers on this show already, and I'd like to see, Webb, and this is probably more general than you'd want as a response. I'd like to see just a turning of the page when it comes to the defense gets all the money and all the assets and all the everything, because it didn't work. And it's been way too long since the Steelers have been good offensively. I don't believe that it's a coincidence that the Steelers' failures offensively have been right in line with their playoff failures. When the Steelers were scoring a lot of points, Ben Roethlisberger, prime time, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, offensive line that they had, Heath Miller, they were winning playoff games. They weren't winning as many as people would have liked, but they weren't this. All this team does is get into the playoffs, give up a ton of early points, meaning defensively, and then it can't score. And the one pattern that really leaps out more than any other isn't something specific from these current playoffs. It's you got to score points. Look at the scores of these games. Look at what it takes for a team to keep pace with another one that's scoring. Yeah, defense wins championships, blah, 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 and all that other stuff. And it's wonderful to have it. But if you're going to take all these investments and you're going to put all your chips or most of your chips on that side, as it sounds like they're going to do again, Webb, I don't like it. I don't like it. I'd like to see something say, hey, we're committed to not just this offense, but again, to this quarterback. The first position, the first facet of football that was mentioned by Rooney to us in that room was quarterback. He said, that's our top priority. Now, he might have just meant chronologically they need to sign Justin or whatever. But that was the first thing that was there, was quarterback. Still, a half a decade later, we're still talking about quarterback. Maybe this kid is it, but you're not going to know that if you're going and getting yourself another defensive lineman. You still have Cam Hayward. Cam played at a very, very high level this year, to his inestimable credit. You still have Keanu Benton. Do you really, can you look at that third spot and say, oh my God, that's a need. That's a need. No, it's not. It's a want. It's a want. What you need are playmakers. Webb, let's see some playmakers, my man. Oh, by the way, thanks for the kind words for our staff at DK Pittsburgh Sports. We've got a heck of a football staff here. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody checking out Double Shot. We'll be back with another one of these tomorrow.